So now I want to talk about systems. Split that out from management information systems. So now we're looking at systems, and I put a few different little shapes on the board here, but I want to kind of begin with the idea that there are specific inputs and outputs to a system. So let's just kind of take a car, for example. Let's just take a car. Let's get the pen going here. Let's use blue for a change. Okay, so the idea that for any system we have inputs, and those will be represented by a box like this. And the idea that with inputs we have let me talk about, let's say, a car, for example. You know, it's a transportation system, and a transportation needs certain inputs. And so there are different types of inputs. So an input for a car are things like a driver. Okay. What else do we need? We need gas. We need oil. We need water. We need certain physical things like turning the wheel. There's also the idea of things like radio signals, which are inputs to a car. If you want to listen to the radio, if you want to play a CD is one of the inputs. So this whole idea is there are different inputs. Now among these inputs, there are those which are physical, and which we've talked about. In other words, you can drop them on your foot. And there are those which are informational, and sometimes we see the information and sometimes we don't. And the idea is that, for example, with an information, a driver, there's certain information about the driver that's important for a car. That's so you can adjust the seat. Okay, gasoline has to be a certain octane rating so it won't knock. Oil has to be a certain SAE measurement. Water should be distilled water for a radiator and all that. Radio is a certain signal, and the CD has certain information. And all these things basically wind up going from the inputs to the actual processes, and these are represented by circle, the process, the transportation process. And so their inputs, let's put an arrow in there for you. So if we want to have an arrow, we want to get the arrow, click. So you want to have this arrow go from, okay, there you go, attach. And we want to kind of have that go to the process. So what we've got now, so we've got an information or a flow of inputs into our transportation process. Now one of the things that I want you to notice is that the transportation movement, all that type of thing, typically the idea of a process is a verb, whereas the inputs and the outputs, which we'll talk about in a minute, are nouns. Okay, so driver is a noun, gas is a noun, oil is a noun, water, and radio, CD. And so you have those things. And so what happens is that you wind up with the transportation for outputs. And one of the things that you have as far as outputs, I'm using blue, out. Let's make it a bigger line. Outputs. Okay, and one of the things you have for outputs is you have distance, you have speed, you have heat, you have music. What else do you have? So this whole idea is you have different outputs. And again, the idea is, music, that'd be more like sound. So this whole idea is that a system is basically this process, the whole idea where you take and you start with specific inputs and you match them to outputs. Okay? Now one of the things we do is, part of the idea of driving. So let's say that you're driving your car and you have a favorite radio station and you want to save it. The idea is one of the things we need to have here, and part of this system model is some type of storage. And storage is one of those things that is important because it basically keeps the radio station. Let's go with a bigger line. Storage. And there's a lot of things that get stored in a car. Not only the presets for the radio, but also things like if you're a car, one of your dash lights goes on, there is a little storage in your car that records why that dash light was triggered and when it was triggered, so that it keeps here. So there's lots of storage. And one of the things that I want to kind of get out there is the idea of also doing what's referred to as a feedback loop. So let's just put this in here for, copy that, gonna put another arrow in here and paste it. So we have the process going down to the storage. We also have what's referred to as a feedback loop. So you can look at the output and you can adjust the, let's put it on the top just for grins. You can take the output and kind of go, I want to go faster. So the idea is that you sit there and kind of go, okay, and you go back to the inputs and you give it a little more gas. Okay, so that driver kind of presses on the gas pedal faster. Or you sit there with the outputs, I want to go slower, I'm about to hit something. So this whole idea is that you want to have this loop back so that you can adjust the inputs so the process will give you new outputs. So it's a continuous process. And so what we want to do basically is in this type of model is we want to take the systems and model those things that are informational about the systems, so that we have an information system that basically is not the physical system, but it's the informational system for our particular process. Okay, at this point I would ask for questions, but this is the systems part of management information systems.